Here you see the personal pronouns, the subject and object forms. These words are familiar to you, and you don't make mistakes when you speak normally, right? You know how to use I versus me. I speak, but look at me. Nobody says me speak, and nobody says look at I. The personal pronoun subject form are used when the words I, you, he, and so on are the subject of the verb. And in other cases, we use the object forms, such as me and you and him. Here you have the list of personal pronouns in the subject-object forms, singular and plural, but also at the very bottom, who and whom, interrogative and relative pronouns. Use the subject forms when the pronoun is the subject. We say he speaks English well, because he is the subject of speaks. We say George and I are reading the same book. George and I, because it's George is reading and I am reading. So I is the subject, just as much as George is the subject. So George and I are reading the same book. Jared is better at math than I. We say I and not me, because the complete sentence would have been Jared is better at math than I am. We say Oscar is as intelligent as I and not as me, because the sentence would be Oscar is as intelligent as I am. My best friends, Chris and he, will always support me. When you have something between commas, such as Chris and he, it is a repetition of what has been said before. My best friends means the same thing as Chris and he, because my best friends is the subject of will support. Chris and he are also subjects. So my best friends Chris and he will always support me means the same thing as my best friends will always support me, or Chris and he will always support me, because Chris will support me, he will support me. All of that is subject. We, the new generation of America, believe in the environment. We say we because the new generation of America cuts the subject we from the verb believe. It's we believe in the environment. And what is between commas means the same thing as we, the subject. And the words between commas take the same function as the words they replace. If they replace the subject, the words between commas play the same role, so they take the subject form. Likewise, if they replace an object, they take the object form. Use the subject form when the pronoun is the subject. Use the subject form when the pronoun follows the verb to be, and this is something that most people don't know. As is the case with many verbs, you may have, after the verb, a direct object or an indirect object. But if it's the verb to be, there is no object. We say, who knows the answer? It is I, not it is me, because after the verb to be, we use the subject form. Now, you have to understand, people don't speak like this, and people who write informally don't say it. But if you write academic English, and if you want to sound educated, this rule must be applied. This is how people speak formally and how they use English correctly. This is traditional grammar. So after be, use the subject form. It is I. It is the subject of is. And after the verb to be, we use the subject form. Could I speak to Tom? This is he speaking. He, because it's after the verb to be. This is the subject, is the verb to be, and he is what follows the verb to be. So use the object form when the pronoun is the direct object or the indirect object of the verb. I see him, you see me. These are direct objects. I gave him a book. Indirect object. I is the subject, gave is my verb, a book is the direct object. I gave what? A book. I gave a book to whom? Indirect object. To him. I gave him a book. Use the object form with a preposition. A preposition is a little word that accompanies a noun or a pronoun. Look at him. At is a preposition. At him. Between is a preposition. So we say look at him and not look at he. So we say between him and me. She gave a nice gift to Sam and me. To Sam and to me is implied. Sometimes the preposition is not repeated. That is completely normal. So, normally the word who is the subject form, and we reserve the word whom when it's the object. Most of the time, most people today remove the M at the end of who. And if you decide not to use whom at all, and to replace whom with who all the time, there is no problem. This is how people speak today, and it's also considered completely all right in writing. But if you want to sound like you have culture, you can use the whom form when the word who is the object. Let's give an example with the subject form. My uncle, who gave me his tie, speaks Portuguese. My uncle speaks Portuguese is the main clause. Who gave me his tie is the subordinate clause. It's a relative clause. Who replaces my uncle? What is the subject of gave? The subject of gave is who gave, and who replaces uncle. Because who is the subject of gave, I cannot say whom. My uncle, who I know is sad, speaks Portuguese. When that happens, when you have I know, I believe, I presume, something like this, then you know that the subject and verb that follow who is not included in the reasoning. In fact, I know, I believe, and so on do not count. They are being used as if they were in parentheses. We say my uncle who is sad because I know does not count. Now, let's give an example with the object form. My uncle, whom you know, speaks Portuguese. My uncle speaks Portuguese is the main clause. My subordinate clause is whom you know. The verb is know. The subject is you. You know. You know whom, direct object. Whom replaces uncle. And because it's not the subject, but the object, direct object of know, we say whom. Same rule as before. My uncle, whom I know you like, speaks Portuguese. I know does not count. Same thing with my uncle, whom I presume, whom I believe you like, and so on. Right? In summary, who is the subject? But because we also accept who in any position, who is always right. The problematic word is whom with M, because it's only used when it has the function of a direct object, an indirect object, or after a preposition. So you have to say, with whom I spoke, at whom I looked, after whom I came, on whom I relied, and so on. The big mistake is to use whom when it takes the role of a subject. Never say, the person whom spoke at the conference. This is wrong. This can never be used. In this case, only who is correct. If you make that mistake, you're making a big mistake. If you're not sure, if the rule is not clear to you, don't use whom at all. This is how we use the correct personal pronouns in formal English.